All right, take your Bibles, turn to Psalm chapter number 63. Thank you, John. I appreciate John. You know, it's not easy when you're here at a church way less than a year to stand up and do prayer requests. Worried about not knowing people's names and he's just willing to do it. There's a lot of things about John I don't understand. And that's one of them. So I appreciate him doing that for sure. I know he had a long day. He was with a bunch of kids all day teaching school and middle school and high school with Bible. He ran chapel for me today, and I preached to the elementary kids upstairs, and he ran the high school chapel down here. And then he took a couple of boys, 2 or 3 boys home so they could come to church tonight. And they went home with them and played some games or ate some pizza. Hopefully did nothing that I'll have to call him in the office for tomorrow. But thank you, John, for doing the prayer requests. We do have several thank you cards from missionaries from our missions conference. I know Bethany gave me one right away, and that was great for her to do that. That was kind of her. And then we have one from the Hooper family, Blaine Hooper, and then we also have one from the Means family. And the Means was a funny thing and he mentions it in the thank you card. Thank you for making room of us, even though you weren't really kind of expecting us. And there was a little bit of a miscommunication we thought that he was not going to come because he had a church to be at on Sunday. But what he was saying is, I've just got to be at a church Sunday night. I'll be there Friday and Saturday if you need me, kind of a thing. And so when he walked in the door, we're like, that really looks like a missionary. Should we be expecting him? And then, but he was very. It was just one of those things. But he just jumped in. I feel like the Lord had him here for a reason. He was the missionary to the Czech Republic, if you remember, and just really good people. His teenage daughter was with him, and then his wife flew in to meet him on the deputation trail for a little while. She met him on Saturday. She flew in, so we were able to meet her on Sunday and whatnot. And he was one of the finalists in the rock, paper, scissors tournament Saturday night when we did the Lighthouse Olympics. And it cracked me up because all 4 or 5 of the other people were 6th grade or younger. And he had no mercy on these kids. Miss Judy, he was looking at them like you look at me. Like that. Man. And man, it was great. And I said, Czech Republic doesn't have mercy. He goes, nope. I'm like, wow, I will break him. It was great. So I'm going to, I'll have John, if you can, put these on maybe the front row. People come up, and I like people to read these, right? Like, you can come up and just kind of take a gander. And for me to read them verbatim, I'm going to pronounce something wrong. But I do want to say something. Brother Ricky Haygood said goodbye to his wife. She's in heaven. Not goodbye, see you later. And so we want to, so they wrote a wonderful letter, and Lighthouse, thank you so much for the peace lily that was sent in our mom's honor. Also, it was so very sweet to see many of you at her viewing and service. Our family felt great love and support. Thank you for that. Love Ricky Haygood, the Brodericks, and the Batemans. And they're a wonderful family. He raised some good ones, and we have his grandkids in our school, some of them. We like Marlo Broughton, Broughton's, Ricky, And, but no, he's got some, we really do love his family. And so, and the funeral he did a great job introducing and welcoming everybody. And pastor did a great job speaking, and the other pastor did a great job. And I text pastor after that. I said, you did a great job. He did a great job. And when I die of old age, pastor's going to preach my funeral, and it's going to be magical. So in about 84 years. So I appreciate that. So thank you for those. And remember when we pray, John, throw them out here. And you guys can read those missionary prayer letters and thank you cards. Now, we have some visitors, and I don't want to embarrass them, but I'm going to call them out anyway. But no, Chris and Adele are here, and then Joy, and they all know the Cowans, and they're from Las Cruces, New Mexico. And Joy actually is very good friends with them, and she taught in the school that Chris ran out there. Still teaches there, even though we stole Chris from her. And we were just like, come on out here. And then the Haywoods, they came out here, and they're possibly praying and about moving here. And so we're really excited about that. And so Des and Nadia were in the school shadowing and doing their cat and doing some things that we do for the older kids to get ready and make sure it's a good fit. They did great, by the way, on their tests. Just want you to know. I haven't forwarded that email to you. They did wow. Tirza, you did a great job running that school through Chris. So they did great. They really did. So I don't normally publicly tell everyone how a kid did with private information on testing, but when it's that good. But no, they did good, and we're willing. They're the Haywoods, and this is Ricky Haygood. And I cannot tell you how many times I've said, "Oh, how are the Haygoods doing?" And Chris just looks at me and goes, "You mean the Haywoods?" So, but no, we're really thankful for them coming all the way out here and visiting the Cowans. We sure do. We're sure appreciative of the Cowans. And, of course, we love the Cowans because, I helped, form Chris into whatever that he is now. But and then Tears is so patient with him and gracious and willing to put up with whatever. But no, we're very thankful for them and all the work that they've put into the school. And so we're excited that they came out here. And, any friend of the Cowans is a friend of ours. That's what I like to say. So get up by and just say welcome and hi to them. And thank you for coming out. And we're excited. Thank you for the sloppy. By the way, Kelly said I need to announce this. My mom, who's in heaven now, she used to call Sloppy Joe's Sloppy Jeffs. Yeah, in honor of me. So I told Kelly, I said, when you pray for those, we got to say Sloppy Jeffs. And I didn't get over there for their prayer in time, so I don't know if they were truly blessed. But someone said, "What, were you sloppy as a kid?" I was like, how can you turn something so endearing into a cut down? I would never do that to someone. But yeah, they were amazing. And I was going to be like, I want to have a light stomach when I preach and teach. I don't want to eat much. But then that macaroni. And macaroni is basically a vegetable. You're like, no, it's not. Go to Cracker Barrel. Look on the menu, and it's probably listed on, it's listed under vegetables. If Cracker Barrel says it's a vegetable, it's a vegetable. They know more about cooking than me. And so I had my vegetables. I ate some macaroni with a Sloppy Jeff and some broccoli and too many pickles. So thank you for all the ladies that helped. I know so many of you helped and jumped in and did that for us. And we're excited. Kristen put on social media this week, and just a reminder to everybody that maybe sees our church stuff. I know we put reminders on the Lighthouse of what the menu is, what we're having, but she put it up there. And I love that we can tell the community that we do this thing called Family Supper, and through us eating the family suppers, we're getting the gospel to the world. And I know I've probably belabored it, but to see Robert stand up here and talk about that man who got saved on the radio and then now is looking at maybe training to be a preacher, and the money that was used to put the gospel on the radio there in Burkina Faso was for the last 2.5 years, that money has come from our family supper money. And so it's a little cheaper to get radio time in Burkina Faso, West Africa, a third world country, than it is here. And so by buying macaroni and, unfortunately, when she makes it, green beans, you're sacrificing for the Lord to get the gospel. I love that we have a church that way. So we're in Psalm 63. If you like your little dots on your chair, turn around. If you have a dot that's blue, you get to take 10% off your tithe this month. If you have a green or a pink one, you pay double tithe this month. So let's just turn around and look at that. The yellow, green, yellow, same thing. Yellow means your husband is fired, Tirza. But no, I'm just kidding. That is because, let me explain that. We had the wedding here this last Saturday. Tim and Olivia got married. I've been teasing them that they could just get married, or Olivia could, do the right thing and call the thing off. But they did it. They got married. Now they're stuck with each other, and they're on their honeymoon. They've been so faithful in church, haven't they, Monique? And when they walk in the door, I'm happy to see them. A little different than when I see you, but I'm happy to see them. And they come in and they sit down and they listen and they laugh, and it's wonderful. And man, them not being here is hard. I told Tim, I'm like, I expect you in Sunday school tomorrow. He wasn't there. Honeymoon. Talk about putting your wife before God. I tell you what, anyway. But pray for them. They're on their honeymoon, and they're living life and enjoying it. Well, when they moved chairs around for the wedding, this was a great opportunity. And so Jamie and Will and Frank came in here, and they have basically moved every single chair you can imagine in here, trying to get it a little bit. There's a couple of different styles of connectors for the chairs, so to get them all to latch better and so they don't move as much, they just reorganized them. And so they still have a little bit to do, and they didn't want to get them all confused, so they put those stickers on there to keep their brains in the right order. So I have no idea what they mean. And they really don't mean you have to pay double on your tithe, although we'll take it. So I'm sorry that the stickers are on there, but I think they're fine. We'll take them off by Sunday. We don't want that many people paying double tithe. That would be crazy. So Psalm 63, we're jumping into the Word of God tonight. I love this psalm. I love how it starts. And I can already tell you we're only going to get through a couple of verses. Of course, we're going to go to other places in Scripture. But we're talking today about drawing closer in the desert. And you'll find in Scripture that God uses locations to teach lessons. And it's really interesting how he does that. And in the desert, I think that the area of a desert, of a wilderness, is mentioned more than anything. Now, I didn't plan on this, but I like to call myself a desert rat. My dad, I always try to get him to move out closer to where I'm at. But I was in North Carolina for 11 years. I've been in Georgia now for 5 years. And he'll say, I'm a desert rat. I can't leave New Mexico. And he hiked, 75 years old. He probably hiked Chaco Canyon this week. He probably was up somewhere in the mountains outside of Albuquerque. He loves to hike, and he loves the desert. And I love the desert. And my wife, when we moved from Las Cruces, she's like, I never thought I'd say this, but I love the desert. And she's like, I wish I could just move the desert to wherever God takes us in ministry. I love the desert. There's something about it. Anybody ever been in like a real desert? Yeah, it's just something about it. It's cool at night. It's hot during the day. You know, there's something about it. It's dusty. I love the desert. And when I moved out to North Carolina, I'll never forget it. I kept getting turned around because in Albuquerque, where I grew up, and most cities out west, like they're newer cities, I don't know how to explain it, but the core of the city, it's all like straight lines, you know, for the most part. And if you get turned around, you just got to look where the mountains are, and it shows west. The mountains are west. Wait, no, east in Albuquerque. I can't remember. Cruces, it's east too, right? Yeah. And then you know, if opposite of east is west. So in Albuquerque, where I grew up, there's the West Mesa. And then you just got to do some math in your head to realize that way's south and that way's north, right? And I usually knew north because that's where I drive to Santa Fe. But the mountains were my landmark. I moved to North Carolina, and now in Georgia, when you're on like Dawson, you're on 9 or 53 or 52 or 136, all you're surrounded by is trees. And you say, aren't they pretty? No, because I can't see where I'm at. And not only that, you can't see sunsets as easy, right? I probably just convinced you to I'm sorry. Look, I miss the sunset. We used to be able to walk in Walmart parking lot and see this majestic sunset. And now, you know what I walk out and see in Walmart? Trees and Five Guys, which actually sounds pretty good for lunch tomorrow, I'm just saying. Look, but there's something about the desert. And God, we know that God went in the desert he was tempted in the desert. He fasted for 40 days in the desert. He performed an incredible percentage of his miracles in the desert. Feeding the 5,000 happened what would be considered the desert, like outside the town, out of an urban environment, in this rural setting. There wasn't sustenance. They couldn't just go pick apples from an orchard, and he was worried about them eating, and he didn't want them to faint. The Bible says he didn't want them to faint by the way. Well, there's nothing to eat. It's the desert, and so there's a lot of stuff. John the Baptist, he literally went viral in his day, right? There was no Facebook, there was no TikTok, there was no social media. But he went viral in the desert. People would go for miles just to see this crazy guy with camel hair, eating grasshoppers, preaching about repentance and the kingdom of heaven being at hand. And it had been the first time a prophet like that had been to visit the children of Israel for 400 years, nothing through the silent years. But all that happened, and he was baptizing people in the desert, right? And so we see this in Psalm 63. Before we read anything, I want to give you a little backstory. This is David in the desert at a very low time in his life. He is dealing with, they believe, if you read it, and you read the theologians, they believe he's dealing with Absalom's rebellion. And if you know anything, if you've studied anything about David, we're not going to go into too much, but Absalom's rebellion was a byproduct or a consequence of some of David's sins. And there was a domino effect to some of the sins that David committed, some of the mistakes that David made, some of the choices that he decided to bring into his life. And there was the rape of family members, there was death of babies, there was murder of Uriah, there was dramatic and drastic consequences to David's actions. And I believe with all my heart, if you look at Solomon, I think Pastor mentioned it either Sunday or last Sunday, where he talked about Solomon having a lot of wives. And I have one wife. I will only ever have one wife. Why, you say? Because I'm afraid of that one wife. But I can't imagine having 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 and then other women and like thousands, and they're pulling Solomon's heart away from God. Like, it was a terrible time. Well, if you look at it, women were a weakness in Solomon's life. I think we all can say that. God calls him the wisest man in the world, but he still couldn't lead himself when it came to women. That's how dangerous it is, fellas, when it comes to women, right? And so he says that it was a weakness. We see that it was a weakness. Well, where did Solomon kind of maybe get that weakness? Well, David had that weakness. David really, really had that weakness. He had Bathsheba. He had a house in the back of his, a house full of concubines in the back of the palace. It's not exactly, and those choices and those sins, there were consequences to that. And so we see that. So David is wrestling with some consequences, and he's in a very low time in his life, and he's in the desert. He's in the very desert that someday John the Baptist would preach in, that Jesus would be tempted in. He's in the same geographical region, they believe, where all of that stuff would happen. So really, the history of the world would be changed and wrinkled and just come to pass in this little desert area. Some pretty dramatic, amazing things. The desert that the 5,000, the 4,000 were fed in, some pretty amazing things happened in this. But thousands of years before, or hundreds of years before, David is sitting in this desert penning this psalm. So understand that backstory. If you ever study the Psalms, one of the beautiful things about the Psalms is like trying to understand the backstory of where they're at. When you read Psalm 51 and realize that's David's penance psalm, that's his I'm sorry to God. Like it brings more understanding to the words he writes. Because you ever read Psalms and you're reading a psalm and it's like, whoa, this guy's like, he's upset. It's like, you ever been cut off at Walmart or cut off and then the cashier at Walmart's mean and then you go home and write like, the depths of destruction should eat at their soul. Like, no, we probably don't. I hope you don't do that. We can refer you to a therapist if you are doing that. But like, David was writing this strong, God will laugh and have them in derision as they're eaten apart and like killed and stoned. And like, it's an outcrying of asking God to destroy his enemies, asking God to heal his soul, saying sorry for things he did wrong. And knowing the backstory of some of those Psalms will really, really help you in your study. And there are times, where David says like, oh, that I was a bird or I was an eagle, like I could just fly away. Like, you ever felt that way? You ever had so many problems in life you just wish you could just escape it all? I don't have those problems except for Monday through Sunday, right? Like today, there was a couple of things that popped up. And I had a couple meetings today I didn't really look forward to. And don't worry, it wasn't with anybody here. John, it wasn't our meeting. I looked forward to that one. Not really. But you walk in there and you're like, man, I just wish I could leave. You ever, yeah, for real. Oh, man. Like you feel like you could just, oh, man. You ever felt that way, Miss Judy? You ever have a doctor's appointment you don't want to go to? I do. I have like doctor's appointment. I'm like, I don't want to go to this one. I don't want to. Man, I had the dentist call me. I got to get a crown. I have a filling that fell out in a molar, and they want to put a crown. They're just worried about the structure. I know what they're worried about. They're worried about me paying them money. You know what I mean? Anyway. And just kidding, if my dentist is watching. But they called me today, and I realized I double booked myself tomorrow. There's a staff meeting. There's some things going on. I can't. No, Chris, I will not choose the dentist over pastor staff meeting. Pastor, I'm with you, buddy. But anyway, and I'm like, I can't go to that dentist meeting. Now, could I have probably worked it out? Don't tell them this, but maybe. But I just didn't want to go. David says that. David, the king of a nation, he was just like, I just want to get out of here. I remember as a kid, I was leaving to go take a test. Like I was going to school and I had a big test that day. And I was looking, I had a big fat bulldog named Margot. And I was walking out and Margot was just laying on the couch, just living life. And I remember thinking to myself, I wish I was Margot. Because Margot didn't have to take this physics test that I had to take. And I'm the principal of a Christian school, but can I tell you the truth? God is judging America because of physics. Like, it's physics. It's a judgment of God that we have to do physics. I didn't like it. I didn't like chemistry for sure. And I looked at my dog and I'm like, I wish I was you. And David writes that in the Psalms. He's like, that I could just, not about physics, or I want to be a dog, but like, I could just fly away. I could just get out of here. And there's so many human emotions wrapped up in the Psalms that can help you in your day-to-day life. And you could hear literally how God says a man after his own heart. And we know by Kings and Chronicles that David was the measuring stick that God used for every single king of Israel after him. It'll say, oh, he didn't walk like David, his father walked. So if there's a guy that has the heartbeat of God, that yes, he did wrong, he did more than make mistakes. He drastically messed up. But he still found forgiveness with God. And he still tried to end his life stronger. And it's amazing. And we can get strength by that. And that's where we're at in this psalm. Psalm 63 in verse 1, it says this, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. To see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. Because of thy loving kindness is better than life. My lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. When I remember thee upon my bed, and meditate on thee in the night watches, because thou hast my help. Therefore, in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul followeth, I love how he says this, my soul followeth hard after thee. Thy right hand upholdeth me, but those that seek my soul to destroy it shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword, they shall be a portion for foxes. But the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that sweareth by him shall glory. But the mouth of them that speaketh lies shall be stopped. That's a powerful passage of Scripture. And I don't think there's any word in that Bible right there that you're reading that is there by accident. So when he says, my soul followeth hard after you, like it's everything I have. I'm going after you. And when he says, man, we're going to go in these first two verses, but there's something about David that I believe with all my heart that God uses people and he uses them to their strengths. And sometimes, and all human beings have weaknesses, right? And so sometimes when a man will get up to preach, and I was under preaching sometimes in training where it was like, just find a preacher you like and emulate him, just copy him. But you know what that really does? That produces inauthenticity. It produces fakeness. And if you've ever heard someone get up, and there's guys, and they're fine fellas, I'm sure, but when they talk to you in private, it's different than when they talk to you on the stage, amen, brother? And it's like, I want to be real. And I understand I'm not a great orator. I understand that I'm not going to speak to Congress someday. I understand that, I'm not going to ever preach or teach lessons on YouTube on how to publicly speak, and that's okay, because God made me. And there are times, every now and then, where I say a joke or we goof off up here a little bit, but that's how I am. If you follow me throughout the day, I probably make a couple of jokes here and there. We kind of laugh a little bit at the school. We kind of have and that's, and God uses strengths, and God, he has to deal with weaknesses of us. So there are times, and God says this, we talked about it last week, right, where we talk about love, and we talk about before 1 Corinthians 13, when you're in 1 Corinthians 12, he's talking about how everybody has different gifts, and some people have administrations, some people are organized, and they can delegate, and they can oversee, and they can supervise. Some people aren't great at that. I've met people, they can't tell what time it is for their own life. How can they tell other people? How can they organize a schedule when they can't even figure out how to get somewhere on time? And that's just one of those things. And God created, but at the same time, they're the most creative people in the world. And if you need them to decorate a wedding cake or build the Eiffel Tower or, I don't know, spray paint graffiti on, a Tesla, they'll just be great at it, right? You just never know. Now, we have to understand something. David had some strengths. And one of the strengths that David had, and I believe this all my heart, is whatever he did, he went all out. He just did. I'll just go kill the Goliath. When's the last time you saw a whole army tremble at one enemy, and you're like, yeah, I'll just go do it? And I believe, and if you read a lot of the historians and theologians and Bible scholars, I believe David was probably young college age, is what I believe. And I understand you might be like, no, he was 5. Okay, well, maybe he was. I don't know. But I am saying this. I don't care if he's young college age. I don't care if he had as many muscles as me, which would be intimidating for anybody. I wouldn't go do it. Like we preach and we're like, yeah, Eliab, his brother, what a coward. King Saul was a coward because he wouldn't go and he was the king and that was his place. He was head and shoulders taller than everybody in Israel. He should have gone. And I'm like, I don't want to throw that stone because I would not have gone. I am not a fighter. We would call me a lover. I am not fighting Goliath. It's not happening. I would go to Goliath and I'd be like, let's reason. Let's talk about this. Let me show you this funny YouTube video and I'll stab you in the back as you're laughing. I don't know. I don't know what I would do, but I would not fight him. But David's like, yeah, I'll just go all out. I'll just risk my life. I'll risk my future. I'll go kill this guy. That's what he did. And he had a backstory where he's like, oh, there's a lion. Like if I see a lion or a bear trying to come after my dad's sheep, you know what I'm doing? Exactly. I am running. Well, hold on. You didn't have to say it that quick. You just met me. But yeah, I'd run. I would run. I'm a little slower than I used to be, but I would run. Like, I don't know. Bill Winter's the type of guy, he would be like, no, I'll negotiate him into a business deal and chop his legs off, Pat would come in with a spear, yelling from the bushes, just stabbing that bear. I'd be running. Pastor would build a cage. He'd sit down with his calculator and he'd build a cage. John would ask Lexi to take care of it. Like, we'd all take care of this bear problem a different way, but what David does, I'll just go kill it. Like, what? Like, I'll just go risk my life for sheep? For sheep? Not even hamburgers. Like, not even cows. Sheep. Like, I can't even imagine. I can't fathom it. But whatever David did, he did big. He really did. Like, he messes up with Bathsheba. It's not like, oh, let me fix this the best, classiest way possible. No, we'll just murder her husband. Like, what? And we'll make Joab, and we'll make sure that there's other people guilty with blood on their hands too. Like, oh, God says not to number the people? I think I'll do it anyway. I'll drastically defy God in the most blatant thing I can do as a government for weeks. And God judged him for it, right? He does these things really big. But also when David followed after God, he did it with everything he had. Like when David repented, you read the stories. He's sackcloth and ashes and screaming and just weeping in agony over his failure and his sin. And he goes big about it. And so when David has some language in the Psalms, his language can be very dramatic. Poetic, yes, but dramatic. And so right here we have this where he says, he says, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. And I love that. We see here that, and in verse 1, we see that David's relationship with God was both personal and possessive. And that's important, right? And we say it all the time. Christianity is not about a religion, it's about a relationship. We say that, but then, of course, we add these legalistic rules and guidelines that you have to follow for me to approve of you. Like, forget that you have the royal priesthood of the believer and that you have individual soul liberty. Your rightness with God is up to my discretion because I have this list, right? And so, hold on a second. My job as a Christian is to get close to God, is to be close to Jesus, is to learn that relationship and understand who I am in that relationship. I'm the son of God. I'm joint heirs. I'm in the family of God. There are certain rights and privileges that my son has and my daughter has and my wife has that no one else has because they've earned it because they're my family. They're just my family. And when I say they earned it, they didn't really earn it by doing something. It's just because of who they are. It's just a fact that is earned by their presence and being, and that's just like you. You didn't do anything to earn your way into the family of God. Jesus did it for you. And you are in the family of God. That's a huge thing. My son, it was funny. I was working today, and Jedediah Howard cleans my office for me. He is well paid. Don't get me wrong. So he came in my office, and he vacuumed, and I have a deal with him. I got to work on it. I don't know if he's getting steak or not, but he saw me eating steak yesterday. I'm trying to be low carb at lunch. Found some steak on sale at Publix. Made me some steak, and Jedediah Howard, so I was like, oh boy, is that steak? Miss Moy, we made a deal with him. He goes, are you going to grill me a steak? And I'm like, sit here, you little fourth grader. Was he fourth or fifth? Yeah, little how dare he ask me for a steak? That's what I thought. Well, Miss Moy was sitting there tutoring him. She's so smart. She goes, yeah, we'll get you a steak if you get this grade on your test. And he goes, Jiminy crickets, I'll do it right now. And he's like, this is George Savage in a little boy's body. Like, he is just like, he's great. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, that's right. We'll get you a steak if you get this grade. I got to get with you. I don't know. But today he's like, oh boy, today's my big day. And I'm like, Tim just got married. Do you have something to tell us, And he goes, I gotta do good on my test. I'm like, oh, that's right. So he vacuums my office, and we chit-chat like we always do, and he gets out of there, and he didn't shut my door. And then I was looking down. I was reading or doing some work. No, I was reading. And Ryan came in and was moving around. Well, Ryan runs the chapel media for me, and I said, hey, Chris is preaching in chapel, just so you know, for the slide, because we usually put the speaker, who the slide is and stuff. And I look up, because Ryan didn't say yes, sir. And I'm like, how dare he? How dare he not, answer me by my honorific? And I look up, and it was Chris. And let me tell you something. When you look up and just see your husband, it's scary. And he's looking at me, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were Ryan. Because when Ryan gets there to school, he'll just walk in my office. Now, he checks to make sure I have a red light in case I'm in an important or serious meeting that he can't walk in on and stuff. And I do that because sometimes when I'm meeting with ladies, I can't close the door, or all the time when I'm meeting with ladies, I don't close the door. And so if he doesn't, if the door's open, the light's on, he just walks in, And, so I look up and I'm like, oh, it's Chris. But I just automatically thought it was Ryan because the way Ryan walks in, I'm like, did you know you could do something with, and I'm not putting myself in this illustration as God, I guess I am, sorry, but you can just walk in the throne room. God says you can go do you know how hard it was to get in the throne room back in the day when Hebrews was written? Right? You could just walk in the Emperor of Rome's throne room. You couldn't just walk in the throne room of the Persian emperor or Artaxerxes. Could you imagine? You can't do that. I dare you. Matthew gave that devotion in men's prayer breakfast the other day about how he was volunteering and he got all these different places. But do you know how, even then, how hard it was for him to get even close to anybody. You can't. God says you can come in anytime you want, your family. That's huge. And you know what we do? And I hate this. By negative self-talk and beating ourselves up and letting shame rule our life and not living in the forgiveness of God, all you're doing is beating up God's family. Why beat up God's son or daughter or loved one? That's who you are. And so David knew that. David understood where he played. He's like, oh God, thou art my God. You're mine. It was a personal thing, but it was also possessive. There was something, and there's something about ownership and possession where you'll defend it, right? Chris and I, we're different people by far. I'm not saying anything about my IQ compared to his because he's smarter than me, but I am the type of guy, and he drives him crazy, I think, a little bit, but I'm not the guy. When I go to a restaurant, you ever see, you go with someone, and they always sit with their back to the corner, and they know where all the exits are, and they watch everything just in case anything crazy happens? How many of you gravitate towards that, or you know someone like that? Listen, when I go to a restaurant, I do like to sit with my back to the wall. But it doesn't have to be the wall that's seeing the front door for the threats. I like to see where my waitresses are coming from, where my waiter's walking in at with my food. Because I love that bated anticipation of, oh, those are my pretzel bites. And my back could be to the door. I just want to know, where's my refill? Where's my refill? I'm not at this restaurant to look for threats. We can do that at paintball. I'm at this restaurant to eat a steak or to watch someone eat green beans because they're going crazy or something like that. I'm a different person, right? That's okay. That's definitely okay. But there's something about, I think, all of us where there's things you have in your life, and they might be material possessions, although Pastor reminded us on Sunday night not to be materialistic, I'm just saying. Or maybe it's your family where you're protective of them because they're your family. I'm much more protective of my family than I am your family. I really am. I'm not good about locking the doors on my car when my kids aren't in there. But I usually try to really be careful about locking the doors on the house when my family's asleep at night. You know why? Because I love my family. I care about my family. I worry about my family. I'm going to say this, and I don't want you to get me wrong. I don't worry when you drive. I just don't. When Lynn Fawcett drives to work tomorrow, I'm not going to be like, I hope he makes it okay. I do hope you make it. I do. That sounds bad. But I'm not worried about him. Number one, it's Lynn Fawcett. He can drive anything, right? But Steve Pierce, when he jumps in a bus, I'm like, oh boy, I get worried a little bit. I don't want a crazy person hitting Steve with the bus when he's driving our kids or anything. But you know what? When my kids get behind the wheel, when my kids are driving, even if we're in the car, my wife's driving, grabbing the front seat, I'm pretending to read, and I'm looking at how fast are they going. We have Life 360, and we're looking at the phone to see how fast they're going. They went to play pickleball with a young couple. I'm not going to say their names because he led prayer requests tonight. But they went to go play pickleball last night, and as Ryan's driving home, my wife's like, we got to talk to him. He's speeding. You got to love technology, right? Well, we worry about that because they're ours. We love them, right? I've seen Pastor Matthew is a grown man in some ways. But I've seen Pastor worry about his son. Like, Pastor has grandchildren, and he really worries about he cares about the grandchildren more than his assistant pastor with one leg, I'll tell you that. But because they're his, right? You guys, you'll open the door for a lady. You'll be kind. You'll be long-suffering. You'll be patient. Unless they cut you off on the road. But you really protect your wife. Because they're yours. Well, there's something about God, understanding the possessive nature of God to us and us to God. That's our God. That's my God. Yes, he's our church's God. Yes, he's your pastor's God. But he's your God. And you're his son or you're his daughter. You're his precious, wonderful. He gave his son for you. He gave the firstborn, the greatest, the sinless. He gave that up for you. You're that worth it. I hate it when kids say I'm worthless or I'm not worth anything. You are worth the Son of God's blood. And David understood this. And I think that's why David was able to grasp the forgiveness of God. Because what we do, and you've sinned before, and I've sinned before, and we let the devil, shame is a tool of the devil, and he's going to hang it over your head, and you're going to well, I messed up. I remember, I'll tell you this, and this is maybe personal, but I've had people ask me, well, do you think that the dump truck was God's plan A for your life? I'm like, what are you insinuating? I don't know that. But I know this, he loves me no matter what. He loves me with 1 leg, 2 legs, 4 legs, which I have, by the way. 2 of them are just in a cabinet at home. You go to Song of Solomon. For time's sake, we won't go there. And I know that David didn't write Song of Solomon, but in Song of Solomon it says, I am my beloved's, and my beloved's is mine. And it's this love story. And of course, it's a picture of Christ and the church, of God and his creation. It's a love story that it's a picture, right? And I know that we pretend it's not in the Bible until the teenagers are 17. I get it. Memorize any verse you want, but don't turn to Song of Solomon. I get it, whatever. But listen. It's a beautiful story. And twice in Song of Solomon it says that, I'm his and he's mine. Well, don't forget that. When you go out throughout work this week, next time you mess up for your family or you fail or you flop now don't get me wrong, there's consequences in life. There's just consequences in life, okay? If I leave my wife and go marry a circus clown, the pastor's going to have to fire me, all right? Okay, it's going to happen. I'm not doing that, okay, but that's just going to happen. So yes, there's consequences, but there's still forgiveness. You can still rebuild a life. You can still patch it together. Are there cracks? Are there scars? Are there problems? Sure. But you are worth it to God. God, you are worth the forgiveness. You're worth the Calvary. You're worth dying on a cross. You're worth all the pain and all the sacrifice that he went through on earth and lived a perfect life because you're his son. You're his. There's just something about it. There is. I can't explain it. I can go over illustration after illustration. There's things you have. You don't even know why you love them so much, but they're just yours. They're just yours. Even in a materialistic way, you kind of attached some things, right? I bought a pen the other day. This pen was magical. And you don't understand what I've been through to find a good pen, okay? I found this pen. I ordered on Amazon. Will Gordon had another pen, and he had an ink cartridge in it that was .38 millimeter lead, and I like to write small, so I need a fine tip point. I ordered the different ink cartridge, a different shell. I put it together myself. This thing, as I wrote with it, you could hear angels humming. It was amazing. It was just a pen, though, right? I liked it so much, I bought a second one. I bought one for my desk at my house and one for my desk here. You want to find out? You want to know what happened? Chad, you want to know what happened to my pen? I don't know. It's gone. I am going to say that a certain man who has visitors from Las Cruces has used my office a little bit lately. He's been a little happier. Seems like he got something in his life that brings joy, like that pen. Anyway, but even just a pen, there's something about it. It's my pen. That's how I like it, right? There's just something there. You build traditions with your family. Yeah, some of you have these just traditions. You just do things. Same place for vacation. You do certain things. When I was growing up, this wasn't the healthiest thing, but after church on Sunday night, we would always stop at a Chevron gas station and get 44-ounce Cokes and Pepsis and Dr. Peppers or whatever we wanted to drink that night. And we'd go home and talk about our day. And then, this is really going to go crazy with y'all. They used to have 29-cent and 39-cent cheeseburgers and hamburgers at McDonald's. Well, Wednesday was 29-cent hamburgers. Sunday was 39-cent cheeseburgers. So sometimes we'd go to Chevron, get the drink. Then my mom or my dad would drive separate, or when I was driving, I would drive separate, and we'd go get like 10 cheeseburgers for $3.90. It's not that it was unhealthy. It's healthy automatically if it's that cheap. And we'd go home and we'd eat these burgers and drink these Coke. It was family time. We also did this thing called fonduing. My mom and dad, they would, if you soak meat in hot liquid and eat it. Anybody ever fondue before? Like, it's a thing. I'll never forget it. We did it every so often. It was a thing that our family did a different way, a special way. And right before I went to college, my mom said, "What do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?" And she told me later she was worried I was going to say I wanted to hang out with my friends or something or bring my friends along. But I told her, I just want to stay at home and have a night and fondue. And she teared up and she goes, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just want a fondue." Because it was our thing. It's what the Johnstons did for fun. We put a pile of raw meat on the table and jabbed it. And when my mom would go to the seafood aisle or whatever at like Albertson's grocery store and buy fake crab meat. And to this day, I'm like, I don't know why that's so good. But that's what we ate. It was fake. What if it's fake? What exactly is it? I don't know. Styrofoam in the souls of second graders. I have no idea, but it was good. And to this day, I can't pass it by and go "Oh, that was our thing." Well, right now, we wanted a tradition. And I think it was your family, Chris, that you do glass bottled Coke on Christmas Eve. And we liked that idea, so we did it, but we didn't want to do what they did for food. So we want to do our own thing. So we do hot wings. We do hot wings and glass bottled Coke every Christmas Eve, and we open new pajamas. Yeah. I always know I got new pajamas coming. So when I spilled stuff on, I'm like, it's okay. 38 months till Christmas or whatever. I love it. It's our thing. And you have things. But you have to build that with God. This is our time where this is how I read the Bible with God. This is how I pray with him. I talk with him. Isn't it interesting to me? Now, when God says, he's like, yeah, when you pray like this, you can, here's the standard formula. Here's what you can say. Here's the things you should pray for. But he never said say it word for word. And in fact, the Bible warns us against vain repetitions. I think it's really interesting that God, in the Old Testament, things were so laid out. Then the New Testament comes around and he's like, you got to get close to God. How? Pray. How? You can say this kind of stuff. What else? Got to get close. Just keep praying. Keep reading your Bible. Well, when's the last time you built your own traditions with God? You've built that relationship up. I have a history. My wife and I, we've been married now going on a lot of years that I can't think of right now. And, no, I'm just kidding. We've been married for 21 years. We've been dating. We dated for about a year and 9 months before we got married. Or a year and 4 months, sorry. She's out there. You know her. And I've been with her a long time. It feels like forever. But we've built a history together. If you and God, your only history is yeah, I go to church. What do you do at church? I daydream while he talks. sometimes laugh when he says something funny. It's a hit or miss. It's a flip of the coin. Oh, I sing, and every now and then when I sing a song I like, I really get into it. Like, if that's all you have of your relationship with God, could you imagine if Chad and I said, hey, Chad, how do I build a good marriage? He goes, you live in the same house. Okay, what else? Sometimes you listen to her. Sometimes you listen to her? Okay, no, like every now and then you like agree with what she says. But if she, like, yeah. Well, when she sets the food out in front of you, you try to remember to say thank you most of the time. You can't build a marriage. You can't make someone yours by not putting any effort into it. And if we're not careful in our church-going life, in our Christianity, in our relationship with God, we don't build anything. We just going through the motions. Yes, why do you go to church so much? Because they tell me to. Who tells you to? The Bible? Where? I don't know. They say it, though, sometimes. Like, that's not a relationship, right? There's passion. There's vigor. There's just, like, John and Lexi just got married not long ago. And August 3rd, look at that. How come he said it first before you, Lexi? I'm just saying. But no, August 3rd. Wow, I remembered that. That was pretty good. Wow. June 18th? Yeah, I know. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. But I was like, oh, us? Like, so I was there at John and Lexi's wedding, and John, he just glowed. You know, he has that, like, frolic of hair, like, just bragging about how I don't have any. And, like, he just, like, they were so happy. I was honored to be in Chris and Tears' wedding. I flew all the way from North Carolina to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they got married in Albuquerque. And I was at Rio Rancho, actually, right? And I got to be in his wedding, and I remember thinking, I watched Tears walk up the aisle. I'm like, what is she doing? Like, oh, I wish I knew her longer. I could tell her the truth about Chris, right? And both of those guys, as young men, like, they couldn't wait to spend the rest of their life with this young lady. And the young ladies, too, were duped, and they thought that they were getting a deal, and they were happy about it, too. Well, you remember when you felt that way about Jesus? But now when you walk in church, all you can think about is the things you got to do, how long pastor's going to preach, how long will the line be at Mellow Mushroom or Mod Pizza, or, God forbid you might go somewhere that serves the alcohol. I don't know. Like, you don't even think about Sunday school is, oh, he's talking about this again? Like, and you just don't have it. You're like, man, it's 8:02. Jeff's trying to get done. He's trying to get done earlier. Why is he, where's he landing? I even coughed. Like, where, we're at a place in our life where, and if you're not careful, you're going to lose the love, right? We talked about it last week, about losing that first love. It's dangerous. It's really dangerous to lose that first love. Now, Proverbs 8, verse 12, if we turn to Proverbs 8 and verse 12, this is wisdom, and we're going to read it pretty quick because I'm running out of time. I really do want to get you out at a good time. I want to make sure you get kids tucked in bed early enough to make it to school with smiles tomorrow. But Proverbs 8:12, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out knowledge of witty inventions. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth. Do I hate? Counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding. I have strength. By me kings reign and princes decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. Now this is wisdom talking, but we know that Jesus Christ and God is the source of all wisdom. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I love how God in Proverbs, it's a beautiful thing how he personifies wisdom. Like, it's alive. It's crying in the streets. It's like trying to scream to all the young men. It's like, listen to me, I'm wisdom. You got to listen to me. And this is true. Have you ever gotten later in life and you've made mistakes and you're like, man, I should have listened? I can't tell you how many people I run into that knew Mr. Moy when he was a principal or a superintendent. And, I guarantee you, Mr. Moy, you probably had tens of thousands of young people and staff members throughout your career, if all the public schools and everything. I guarantee you, he gave some people some wisdom that they didn't take. Like, I talked to some kids at our school, and relatively, comparatively to a big public school, we have a small school, 140 students in our school, 40 students in our school. You pray for us. We're re-enrolling. We're almost up to where we are up to where we're at, even with losing take the seniors away. We're right where we're supposed to be. We're going to gather some. God's growing the school. It's amazing. We love it. But even then, I'm not the superintendent of Lumpkin County. I don't have tens of thousands of people that I've had in ministry, right? I don't have that kind of a track record necessarily, but I know the heartbreak and the frustration of trying to give someone some wisdom and they just don't take it. And you're in meetings and you're like, why did you do that? Oh, no. Were you thinking? No, probably not. All right, here's your suspension or your demerits or your detention or line up on that wall. This is called a firing squad. That's a joke. But there's no wisdom. There's wisdom. And if you're not careful, but wisdom and God says this, I love them. Look what he says. I love them that love me. And those that seek me early shall find me. And this word early is important, and it's very intriguing to me. This desert, that how you connect this to the desert. Well, do you remember when Jesus was starting his ministry? What's the first thing Jesus did? Some people will tell you, he turned water into wine. Woo! Calm down. The first thing that was his first public miracle. The first thing that Jesus did was he went in the desert for 40 days and prayed and fasted. Like the Son of God, the incarnation of God in the flesh on earth said, I need God. I need my Father. We all need to be in on this. I'm going to the desert to pray and fast. That was Jesus seeking God early in his ministry. I remember reading these verses as a young youth pastor, and I was like, I need God. I need to get God now when it's early. And that word early in Hebrew, it's kind of an interesting study. Like, we always think of early as like early in the morning. And don't get me wrong, I think you should seek God early in the morning. And you're like, well, I'm not a morning person. Well, when you wake up in the morning, start thanking him, start asking him for wisdom. Make sure God's a part of your morning routine, whatever it is. But there's also something to say about early in marriage, or early in a relationship, or early in a job cycle, or early in a church service, or just early. Just put God first. Seek him early. And David definitely did that, right? David got to the place where he was anointed king of Israel as a teenager that we know of, right? Because he sought God early. He was to himself shepherding sheep, and he did it early. Then, if you turn your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24, and I'm skipping some content to get to the scripture. I think it's better for you to hear what the scripture says than what I say anyway. Hebrews 10:24, it says this. So David, he saw that with God he had a personal connection and a possessive relationship, and not possessive in a derogatory, abusive way, but it's my wife. It's not abusive. It's mine. It's my wife. Like, I'm hers and she's mine. I'm her husband, right? Like, it's important to understand that. Now, that doesn't mean like she doesn't have agency, and I don't control her. I don't get to tell her certain things. But there's an ownership there. There's we own our relationship together. We possess one another. Like, she's mine. That's important. And David saw that with Christ and with the Lord. Then God was David's primary option. He sought him early. It was number one. I need God. He said it. And he says it in a way. And then we get to David saw God both as a need and a want. And I don't have time. I don't want to belabor this. I don't want to sit you out here too late. But listen, there's something about wanting something and there's something about needing something. But when you want what you need and you need what you want, it's a magical symbiotic relationship. So, for instance, I want coffee, but I don't necessarily need it, like, to survive. I'm gonna think about that and talk to you about it. Like, no, really, you can probably. There are whole civilizations that didn't have access to the coffee bean. I know you're like, what? And truthfully, John, Starbucks one time didn't exist. Like, I know you're shocked. Like, it's true. Pastor grew up before Starbucks. He walked uphill both ways to the well, barefoot in the snow, while passing out flyers for Theodore Roosevelt. Anyway, look, I'm in trouble tomorrow. Look, there are needs and wants in life. And I don't know about you, but like, I don't just want my wife, I need my wife. I need her. Like you say, well, you'll survive without her. No, I won't be the same person. She completes me. We are one. So you take my wife away, it'd be worse than taking my leg away. That was adorable, by the way, Monique. I said, like, she completes me. I'm talking all romantic about my wife, and she laid her head on Steve's shoulder. Now that you all are owing, I want to vomit, but it was just so cute. I'm like, you young teenagers back there. Man, I wish I was there in the 40s when they dated. Listen, so that was really, like, that caught my eye. That was, like, I don't just need my wife, I want my wife. If you take her away, I'm not the same person. Because we're one. We're one flesh. Pastor said it in Tim and Olivia's wedding. What God hath put together, let not man what? Put asunder. And so when you take that, like, it's just not, and there's certain things, like, I'm just going to share this with you. You need water. And you should want it too. And if you don't have it for so long, you will want it. I remember when one of my surgeries, they put me, what's it called? NPO, I think it is, if you're a nurse or something like that, right? Faith, is that what it's called? Where you don't have any food or water, basically? So they would literally give me my pills and give me a sponge to bite down to get just enough water to swallow my pills, if I remember right. It was a lot of pain. Maybe they gave me a little cup. But like, if my mouth was wet, they would let me have a sponge. And I'd be like, this is great. And they acted like I should be thankful, you nurses. Y'all make me sick. Listen, it was bad. Like, and I'm telling you, I didn't realize until that moment how much I needed water and I wanted water. I was like, rip out my organs, cut off my leg, rip out the infection. If you get a bone or my heart or my lungs, whatever, just wake me up and give me water. Like, I was getting grumpy. I was getting mad. I wanted the water, right? There are certain things in life. You need to get to the place where you don't just need God. You do need God, by the way. You're not getting to heaven. You're not getting through life. You need to understand your dependency on God, but you should want him too. Some of us, we understand our need of God, but our want needs some work. It's like, yeah, serving others, anyway. So then in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24, it says, and let us consider one another to provoke, that's an important word, unto love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. There's two phrases that most preachers, and I'm guilty of this for sure, like to preach about, is like, don't forsake the assembly, and then so much the more as you see the days approaching, right? I know I've heard pastors say it, I've said it, like we need more church, not less church, and by the way, don't forsake church. We get that, I get that. But if you look at the verse in front of it, it says, let us consider one another to provoke one another to good works. And then he has a colon, and it's the same connected thought. Did you know your job at church is to provoke each other to good works? To influence each other? To motivate one another? I love it when we try to do things like this. Or when Chad was the Olympic, what do we call you? The Olympic czar? I don't remember. Like, game master. Is that what we called him? And like, we're getting people involved. Mac do push-ups and Ben run robocars. And it was just fun to watch Chad get other people excited to do. And it was a really cool night. People got trophies up here. Everyone beat me at everything I tried. It was a wonderful night for everybody else. But there's something about that. Like, hey, Miss Pat's done it. Where it's like, hey, come and help us cook food. Or hey, come and do this. Or look, provoke one another to good works. Provoke one another to do something. And then it says, in that phrase, in that verse, where'd it go? There we go. But exhorting one another. Like sometimes you got to talk to each other. And you got to push each other. And so the whole point here that I'm trying to make is David understood his connection between the house of God and life as a Christian. If you go back in Psalms, in verse number 2, it says, to see thy power and glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. And if you research that word, it's like the place of God, the holy, set-apart place. And there's something about gathering together. You're like, well, I'm the church. A building isn't the church. I agree. You are the church. But at the same time, there's something about a whole bunch of churches, like us as a church gathering together, called out, encouraging one another, and being there for one another. And David, all the way back in the Old Testament, sitting in the desert, being inspired by God to write part of the Old Testament, understood how important it is to come together and how our want and our need of God is going to be influenced for the better because we're in the sanctuary with God's people. And I hope when you come to church, you're not just looking about what you can get. I've met so many people. I've visited so many houses in my ministry in my lifetime where they visit the church and we'd go to see them, and I'd sit there in living rooms, on doorsteps, in front yards, and I'd hear how they're shopping around looking for what churches can do for them and their family. And that's important. I do believe you need to understand that there's a church that'll feed you and that'll help you, and your kids have friends that are good and healthy, and a good youth pastor, and maybe a good Christian school, and have a missions. Like, I get that. But we should also be thinking about, what can we do for our church? Can I minister here? Is there a place for me here? I love it when we meet people and they just jump in. Like, I love that. You know, like I've said his name a lot tonight, but that's probably because he owes me some money. Chad and Jenberg, right? Like, they just jumped in. They just jumped off the boat from Minnesota, and they're like, what do we do? Jen's like, I'm ready to teach school. And Chad's like, I'm ready to run a Lighthouse Olympics. And also run a wonderful ESPN bracket for the tournament this year. My bracket name, do you see my name? Triple J will lose to Chad. But anyway, like, they just jump in. Like, there's tables to put away. I guarantee you'll find a burger probably helping. Like, they're just jumped in. And most of you here are like that. Let's be honest, right? When the Canfields showed up at our church, was it not obvious, like, they were just all in? They're helping people. They're loving people. They're encouraging people. And Kelly's like, oh, I don't mind cooking for thousands of people throughout my lifetime here. Like, I'll just do it, right? And they just jump in. And I love that about our church, that we have a bunch of people that jump in, that they're looking for somewhere to serve, to do, to exhort, to encourage, to edify, to build up. And if we ever fall away from coming to church to see who we can help and encourage, you know, Miss Judy, I'm just going to call her out. Sometimes you just got to call out sin. But that woman has gone through some health trouble lately. She has, but you wouldn't know it by the way she smiles. And she has no idea how much she encourages me, usually by making fun of me. But it's my love language. But she just encourages me. And when she's not here, I feel it. Don't you? Like, if Miss Judy Franklin's not here, you feel it. It's like, this is what church is like without evil. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just hard. Like, I don't like it when I don't see Miss Judy. And then, but she's here tonight, right? And like, it's great. And like, because she goes around and encourages people and smiles at people and jokes with people. She's not sitting there like, who's doing something for me? She, even though she could be the one that needs to be served, she's going around trying to help other people. I've watched it. I love that about our church. So find somewhere and help and serve. How much better can we show God we love him and that he's ours? How much better can we show him that than by taking care of his family? There's something about when someone takes care of you can buy me a present. We could try this out. Let's just do a test. You can buy me a beautiful, wonderful car or gift card or house. But if you did that for my wife and kids, it somehow means, I don't know, maybe I'm probably not a good enough Christian to say it means more to me if you do it for them, but it does feel different, like in a good way. There's something about someone just thinking of my family. Like just thinking, like John, when someone does something nice for Lexi, you probably automatically have goodwill towards that person, right? Lexi, same thing when someone randomly does something good for John that he doesn't deserve. Like you're like, I think I like that guy, right? There's something about it. Well, how do you think God feels when you treat his bride right? When you treat Jesus' bride right? And his bride is the church. And if we're not careful, we'll realize we're not close to God because we're not helping his church and his family. And we have to understand that and be better at it and look at God. And I don't know how you are, but I love the fact that God's God. And I'm in awe of what he's done in my life. I don't deserve the wife I have, the life I've had. I don't deserve the goodness that people have shown me. I don't deserve the mercy of God in my life. I don't deserve him allowing me to be used in a lot of the ways I've been used in life. I'm in awe of God. He loves me. And he wants to continue using and loving me, and he wants to do the same for you. So let's find ways to serve and love and make him ours.